Great. Okay. So thank you for signing up, everyone. As you've seen, the theme of today is demystifying climate jargon. So what we're going to be doing with the help of some friends, go to the next slide, please. We're going to be going in and looking at different elements of the climate. So myself, I think pretty much all of you know me. If you don't know me, my name is Guy. I'm the Chief Changemaker and the CEO of the GDS-Movement, and I'm accompanied by my colleague Parisa. And so we're kind of going to be your hosts today. And next slide, please. And so just some kind of housekeeping before we get going. So this session is recorded, just to let you know. So things are being kept and will be shared. Please stay muted, except during Q&A. Makes it all go a bit better. We suggest when you're speaking, you use the speaker view. If you click on the top right-hand corner, you've got gallery and speaker view. If you look at speaker view, you just see the person that's speaking. Please use the chat box. We love questions. We love ideas, anything to be shared, anything to be asked. It'd be wonderful. So please do use that. Raise your hand or signal the moderator to speak if you've got anything. You can use those reaction buttons. And that's, yeah. And we're going to be speaking, but also going to do a breakout. So here's our wonderful speakers. I'm very grateful. We've got Jeremy from, well, the co-founder of Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency, and now with the Travel Foundation. He's going to share a lot of stuff, what's happening at the Glasgow Declaration that he's really pioneered. So I'm really happy to have Jeremy here. We've got Parisa from Mabrian Technologies, who's going to be talking about a wonderful application and solution they have to help destinations measure and present kind of different aspects of sustainability in the carbon footprint of destinations. We're going to get a bit deeper. So then we've got Poppy, and Poppy's is from Isla. And is going to be talking about what the supply chain needs to be doing. So she's been talking about Trace, which is this wonderful tool that we use at the GDS, and is just booming in popularity at the moment. And then lastly, my dear friend Kirsty from Climate Impact Partners, who's going to be talking a little bit about climate offsetting and kind of demystifying and cutting out the jargon of that as well. So fantastic speaker panels. And then, as I said, you guys are going to be talking to each other too. So that's the flow and the agenda of how it all comes together, and it's going to be fun. So I'm really happy that we're going to kick off now. So next slide, please. And now it's over to you, Parisa.
All right, thank you, Guy. Good morning, everybody from Barcelona. And Selamat Hari Merdeka to any Malaysians here on the call. For my Independence Day, I chose to work for a British man who's at least dressed in batik, so it's a good day. It is also a tropical storm here in Barcelona, so I actually feel like I'm home right now, which is great. So what's new here at the GDS movement? We've been going through a very huge growth spurt recently, so we're experiencing continuous growth here. We've just welcomed 8 new destinations to the family this year. And so we have a couple of firsts, our first Hungarian, first Polish, first Italian, and a Singaporean destination as part of the movement. Krakow will be hosting this year's ICA Congress. And so we will be announcing our awards there. And so it's nice that they're also part of the family. We also have some destinations coming from countries where we already have a lot of destinations. So it's good to see more destinations coming from the US, Sweden, France, and Denmark. So big year for us. And we have a lot of things to look forward to with this last quarter to the year. We have the GDS Index results coming out at the ICA Congress in Krakow in November. So we will be expanding into the top 30. So for those of you who aren't aware, in the previous years, we would publish the top 20 rankings publicly, but we surveyed our destinations to see how they felt with a top 30 or a full transparent ranking. And we were surprised by the results because a lot of surveyed destinations came back and said that they were in favor of a completely transparent full ranking. Well, we decided to ease into it this year. So we're just going to publicly publish the top 30. And then all the other destinations that have participated, just as in previous years, they will be able to access their details in our system. So next year, we have a view of possibly publishing the full ranking for the 2023 GDS Index. We will also be announcing our Innovation Award winner at the ICA Congress. And so for any destinations that are interested to apply, the application deadline for the Innovation Award is the 16th of September. We will share a link in the Zoom chat for anybody who wants to apply for this. We have in that link examples of past winners and what kind of projects we accept and what are the parameters for these things. But we've had some really interesting projects that had come in before in previous years. Last year's winner was Copenhagen. And so definitely check it out. Finally, the GDS Academy has continued to roar on. So tomorrow is the start of the second edition of the GDS ICA City DNA Certificate in Regenerative Destination Management. It's a fantastic course. I took the course in the first edition last year. It was a lot of fun. My cohorts were other destination professionals, and we had a fantastic array of guest speakers or guest lecturers in that time, from the event organizer for the COP26 at the UN to learned academics who are telling us the newest changes in the field. So speaking about academics, we are also continuing our collaboration with the University of Surrey. And at the moment, they are running a study about how sustainable tourism indicators improve sustainable management of tourism destinations. I'm sure a lot of you on the call have received an email from me reaching out to see if you're interested to take part in this study. But for any destinations who would like to learn more, this project is being led by Mohammed at the University of Surrey. His project supervisor for this project is Xavier Font. And so you can reach out directly to Mohammed. I think I saw him here, he's on the call today. If you'd like to take part in the study, it's a 1 hour time commitment, and he interviews you to see how much working with indicators such as the GDS index has influenced or educated you on sustainability. And finally, one of our most exciting updates is that we're hiring. So we have a lot of business coming in, and we need a lot of people to help run them. And so this is a sneak peek into our recruitment process, because the official job post will go out on LinkedIn tomorrow. Everybody on this call, this is a privileged glance into who we're looking for. So we're looking for senior consultants based either in Europe or North America, and a couple of interns, but primarily we're looking at consultants, especially if they speak French or German. You can email us at info@gds.earth or reach out directly to one of us if you have our contact details. We'd be happy to look at any CVs. If you have anyone you want to recommend, or if you are interested as well, let us know. And that's us in a nutshell. Now we'll move over to Jeremy from the Travel Foundation. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll just quickly do the screen sharing. Hopefully that's all there. I can't see you, so I hope that's all good with everyone. I'm here to give a sort of high-level introduction to the journey that destinations have been taking over the last 2 or 3 years towards really beginning to get stuck in with tourism climate action, and to bring that in with some of my own sort of personal journey through work of getting there. As Guy said at the beginning, I'm both co-founder of Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency, and I provide climate advice to the Travel Foundation, helping develop the climate program that we're developing there, which I'll look into a little bit later in my slides. Although my journey had many starts, really, the place where the journey really started for me on tourism climate action was here, a beach in northern Mozambique, looking out towards the Quirimbas archipelago. I was lucky enough to visit this in 2009 when I was writing a travel book around the best in sustainable tourism back at the time. And it was a place that had won all sorts of awards. The lodge was called Galudo. They did remarkable work on community uplift, supporting people to have opportunities that otherwise weren't going to be there, that tourism was bringing to a remote destination, likewise protecting the coral reefs. It was an absolutely beautiful place and a foundational place for me in my journey into sustainable tourism. But in April 2019, Cyclone Kenneth washed in off the Indian Ocean, and in 5-10 minutes, the 200 kilometers an hour winds had destroyed everything that people had spent a decade building up, and all that good work went and never returned. The lodge never started again. And at that moment, I really felt something I'd been wondering and feeling, which is that the fragility of tourism to climate change is obviously huge. We choose where we go because of its beauty, because of its access to the beach, its remoteness on a mountain. And so within a couple of weeks, I'd launched a Twitter feed, a Twitter account for Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency, picking up on other climate emergency declarations and movements around the world, all of which had started in places, communities that were calling on their own administrations to put the climate emergency at the front of what they were doing. And I just began to start conversations. And as you can see, I didn't exactly sweep the world with my first tweet. It was, retweeted 7 times and liked 8. But over the course of several months, those conversations developed to the point at which in 2020, in January, 14 founder signatory companies publicly declared a climate emergency on their websites. And we began sharing this commitment to climate action. Over the course of 2020, this grew despite COVID. People continued to acknowledge that when one emergency went, the next one was going to be coming straight behind. And more, we saw organizations, destinations beginning to get involved. But we were always a volunteer initiative. We were done by people with spare time, perhaps on furlough through COVID, working to try to build the momentum. And as momentum built, it meant that more and more companies and destinations and organizations were coming on board, and it became harder and harder for those volunteers, for those of us who were working in our free time, to deliver on what we had started. So we began to look to see how we could build this into something with real institutional rigor, and something that would move beyond speaking to the converted, speaking to purpose-led SMEs and destinations that were utterly committed on working sustainably, and actually reach into the mainstream. It's just a quick slide to show. I'm going to say some examples of who has joined. There had been a point of 450 companies and organizations who have joined Tourism Declares. But as I said, this number, 450 that we're at, is unmanageable for a small number of volunteers. So we came together in collaboration, and that's very much the theme of everything I want to talk about over the rest of this talk, is coming together, of not working alone. We came together with the United Nations World Tourism Organization, the United Nations Environment Programme, the Travel Foundation, and Visit Scotland, the host of COP26 in Glasgow last year, to take the initial framework of Tourism Declares, the commitment to publish a climate action plan, the commitment to focus on delivering what science said we need to do, and the commitment to collaborate, and turn it into something that was hosted at a UN website that had that sense of institutional rigor and follow-up. And we started with 300 founder signatories that we brought together, and that has continued to grow ever since last November to now, building up towards COP27. Now there are over 650 signatories. The largest companies in tourism, Booking.com and Expedia, have signed up. Companies such as Condé Nast, the huge publisher, Accord, giant hotel company, and then the likes of destinations from Vancouver to Barbados to Gothenburg to London and Partners to Kiribati, the low-lying islands in the Pacific, Palau, all coming together and saying, we need to work together on the challenge of the climate emergency. And all of these companies, destinations, supporting organizations have made the same commitment, a commitment to work together to halve our industry's emissions by 2030, the same as the global commitment, and to reach net zero as soon as possible before 2050, and to publish plans for how they will get involved within a year, and to continue to report publicly on progress. In order to deliver this, an MOU for the next 10 years has been signed between the UNWTO and the Travel Foundation to implement the commitments that we all are making. Tourism Declares is now supported through the work of the Travel Foundation. And to explore what this means for people, the challenge for tourism is that we are so different, we are so diverse, depending on who we are, what sort of company, what sort of destination, where we operate and how we operate. And that makes it very challenging to collaborate because everyone has a different way of being. And we need to both protect and benefit from that diversity. And therefore, what the Glasgow Declaration has said is in order to enable people to learn from one another's challenges and best practice, but also to acknowledge and accept and focus on the difference, we have focused on providing the idea that all climate action plans should focus on these 5 essential parts of climate action. We need to measure. We need to know how much we are causing and what impact our actions are having. Of course, we need to decarbonize. But we also need to focus on what positive good tourism can do. Many of the other speakers will talk about this. The opportunity to impact on communities, to restore habitats, to help ecosystems survive. We need to play the role in regeneration. We have to stop competing on climate. We have to collaborate. We can't see this as a point of difference between my company and yours. We have to come together, share best practice, share challenges, and work as fast as possible. And finally, just as Tourism Declare is concerned, we need to ensure the resources and the finances are there to make sure that climate action plans become climate action. They don't just sit on the shelf. And focus for that, therefore, is building the capacity of our industry to deliver on climate action. And more in the last 12 months since that launch at COP26, 10 months since COP26, we see this growing, and it grows because people are coming together and sharing. There is an online destination climate exchange where front-runner destinations who've been working on climate come together monthly to share ideas, share challenges, and build new ideas, new work. The UNWTO and the Travel Foundation have launched a capacity building working group to support the whole of the industry in meeting the challenges of delivering climate action plans. There is at the One Planet Network website, there is a resource repository already live where the best tools, resources, briefing papers, whatever they might be, are being put so people can know where to go to find useful content, useful tools for climate action. And already, and I'm going to look at one of these a bit later, already there are in-destination pilots and programs happening around the world. Coming soon, there's a briefing paper telling us what tools and resources are most useful for different stakeholders in measurement. Further guidance in the form of signatory packs will be published, and some scenario planning for what we do to get to 2030 and reduce emissions in half is to be published. And what we're learning from all of this, from all these connections and all these work, is how diverse and how connected our sector is. But that very often, although we connect to everything, we're often not involved in key collaborations. That when thinking about climate action, focusing on the local is essential, but so is aligning to what is happening globally. That we all worry about starting because we think we don't know what to do. The truth is we're all struggling, we're all learning, and across the board, we need support in capacity building and in enabling climate literacy. And by doing that, we can help everyone, regardless of their job, see how their job relates through a climate lens to addressing the challenges ahead. And when we bring everyone together, we see that, yes, the enormity of the challenge of climate action is that it is universal. But that same universality makes this a remarkably ideal place for us to come together, put aside competition, and develop collaborative ways of working. Likewise, because the challenge is so enormous, it can paralyze and stop us working. But increasingly what we're finding is the best thing to do is just start somewhere. Start small, make sure it's relevant to the challenge ahead, but start and build the confidence, build the trust, build the networks that enable you to develop further work. Let's not forget, it's only 2.5 years ago that we weren't doing anything as an industry, and we're doing all of this now. Through it starting somewhere and building and coming together. I just want to do a little example of what it looks like when you make that commitment and where it can grow to. Even before Tourism Declares, before tourism was doing anything, Scotland was the first country in the world in April 2019 for the government to declare a climate emergency. A year later, they were the first national tourism organisation to join Tourism Declares. And as a result of that work, that commitment, and then of course being host of COP26, they were co-author of the Glasgow Declaration. Post November 2021, now coming together to see how they could enable and build on those commitments, they've been working with the Travel Foundation, with other partners on a range of projects supporting the destinations and other stakeholders in developing climate action. They've been working with three regional destinations, with Glasgow, the Outer Hebrides Islands, and Inverness Loch Ness, exploring with them what the different approaches to climate action planning might mean for different destinations, helping them build capacity to deliver their first ever climate action plans, and learning from that in order to be able to help other destinations around the country do the same. At the same time, we were working with them, with the national enterprise agencies, the agencies that support the industry and support communities in developing entrepreneurship, to see how they could deliver a national climate action plan that would support all others, tourism businesses, hoteliers, destinations, etc., in doing their part. And the third piece has been a work between the private sector and the destinations, between a tour operator and Visit Scotland, looking at how the destination and the private sector can collaborate on decarbonising the tourism value chain. So just to come to the end here, bring it all together and say why I think it is so important that destinations commit to climate action and get involved in this growing movement of work. As I've learned from the very beginning of my journey in this, starting in Mozambique, destinations are where climate risks are most felt. It's where it happens. But at the same time, destinations are by their nature where the whole tourism value chain connects. It is both the place that feels it, but also the place where that opportunity is available. Having done a great deal of work over the last few months, working towards building this briefing paper that we're publishing, looking around what tools, methodologies, resources are there, the sad reality is that destinations are the least supported when it comes to guidance, to networks, resources. Those of you who are members of GDS are the fortunate few who absolutely have a fantastic opportunity and network and guidance and resources, but there isn't a huge amount in terms of climate beyond where we are now. But as I've experienced through the work we've done with destinations around the world, the nature of destinations, the fact it's where the tourism value chain connects, the fact these are the places where we feel the most risk, but also there is a sense of community there and connection, gives us the greatest opportunity here for truly inclusive innovation. And the final reasons really are that when we talk to tourists, when we talk to other stakeholders, when we survey the industry, there is a growing awareness. How could there not be after summers like this? A growing awareness of the need for change, a growing demand for action. Those who choose not to join the movement, to make the progress, are going to be left behind. But we are still very early in it. This is an early stage of the journey towards climate action. We have to move fast, but it is early. And that gives those who come in early the opportunity to lead by example and truly influence change. Take the example of Visit Scotland, making that early commitment and then being a co-author of the Glasgow Declaration and now designing pilots inside of its own destinations. And all of this really comes together because the reason we're doing this is because we're looking to co-create something truly positive, a vision of tourism that I know is why Guy and all of his team do what they do with GDS, and certainly is why I get up and do what I do, have been doing for the last 20 years, because it's through embedding climate action in destinations that we stand a chance of co-creating tourism's truly positive, regenerative future. Thank you.
Sorry, Guy, you're on mute.
Thank you. I have to say, Jeremy, I'm so impressed with what you've achieved over the last 3 years. It's from that crazy and pretty bad tweet to really moving the UN. And, you know, I think you've done a great job at catalyzing action. So I really, hats off to you and a lot of other people that have been working with you. I realize that. So well done. And, you know, we stand by you and I'm really happy to champion the work and look forward to seeing the guidance come out and sharing that and seeing what we can do as a community, as a movement ourselves to push that forward. So well done. I think that was great. Anyone got any questions for Jeremy? He asked now, and also you can have a think about it and you can ask a question in a little bit too. But if anyone has one, please fire away. I have one. You mentioned Scotland as a kind of a pioneer. Who else is doing some great work?
A lot of the Nordic countries are doing great work. I think there's some really impressive stuff happening in Finland and Norway, Sweden, Denmark as well. I particularly like the work that Norway's been doing on sort of addressing the impact of inbound tourism and trying to really factor that into what is happening. The commitment that Finland made a couple of months ago was the 50th anniversary of the launch of UNEP and the Stockholm conference, and Finland's national tourism organization, Visit Finland, not only declared with Glasgow Declaration, but brought 50 members of the Finnish tourism industry, other regional destinations and other businesses into a mass joint declaration at the same time, which to me absolutely expresses the way the collaboration works, that we can't just do this one by one. We need to come into it all together. But then I could also, Oregon Coast, a small visitor association over there, have been doing truly incredible work. I mean, they're about to publish their climate action plan. I think that, without having read it, but looked at the detail, I think that'll be a benchmark for what regional climate action planning can look like. And then you go into the Southern Hemisphere, the global South, and we see how it changes. And this is, I think, where a lot of our focus needs to be, because in the likes of Chile and Mexico, other places, the focus needs to be on adaptation much more. And what we see there is a totally different approach to it that we, who presumptively do what I might do, need to learn from. And I'm looking forward hugely to seeing what comes out of some of the global South destinations in the coming months.
Brilliant, thank you. And there's some of the people you mentioned are actually on the call here, and we've also kind of like Jaume from Valencia doing some amazing work. And yeah, we'll touch a bit more on those later. So fantastic. Okay, let's move on. I'd like to now introduce Parisa from Mabrian. Parisa, you've got an interesting background. You're originally an engineer, just like me, but you're from Iran originally, and now doing some great work at Mabrian. So let's go look about some practical stuff and solutions that destinations could use. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Guy. I'm going to share my screen.
And you might want to put it into presenter view, speaker view, if you want to see Parisa in better clarity.
Is it okay now? Can you see it? Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting us today. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Parisa, and I'm here on behalf of Mabrian team. And today I am going to talk a little bit about the solution that we have developed in Mabrian to help destination to use big data to measure and track the sustainability in their destinations. So basically, for defining and for measuring sustainability, we take into account the definition outlined by UNWTO, which considers three main pillars: socio-cultural, environmental, and also economic aspect of sustainability. So basically, a sustainable destination would be a destination that can create a balance between the well-being of the local community and residents and create a positive experience for tourists while it maintains a healthy ecosystem for the communities and also generates profitability and economic benefits in the destination. But as you can see, the definition is wide, is broad, and really generating a balance between these three pillars can and actually is a very daunting and hard task. We have identified and we have observed from our experience working with different clients that one of the main challenges that they are facing is that there is little or no tools and metrics that really help the decision makers to monitor and to track their activities and to identify their areas of improvement. So what we try to do here, we have broken down the activity areas of destination management organizations into 6 main areas, which are measurable, these areas are measurable and manageable for them. So this way we can help them in their strategic and operational planning, and also we can help them to monitor their results. And this insight and information can help them to measure and to track and also to compare their level of performance when it comes to sustainability. So basically, we instead of focusing on traditional sources of data, we apply big data to measure sustainability in destinations. So the methodology that we have used here to define these KPIs and these metrics that you can see here. We've done it through a collaboration with Ethico, which is a tourism sustainability consultancy, and also the baseline for us is the Global Sustainable Goals of United Nations, and also the European tourism indicator system of the European Commission. So basically we have analyzed and integrated 30 different KPIs which come together under these 7 metrics and indexes that you can see here. Regarding the economic aspect, we calculate and we observe the distribution of tourist income to see if the local community is benefiting from the tourism activity, and if the income and economic benefit is well distributed. Regarding the environmental aspect, we take into account the carbon footprint that is being generated by traveling to a specific destination, which will go and take a deeper look on it. And also we calculate the concentration of tourism offer. So basically here we take a look at the human pressure on land, and to understand if the tourism offer is concentrated or is dispersed in a destination. We also have some metrics to understand the social and perception on sustainability. So we monitor and we analyze spontaneous mentions in social media regarding the aspects that are mentioning sustainability, for example, environmental or cultural preservation, or welfare, or other keywords and aspects that are related to sustainability. So we can understand if a destination is being perceived sustainable by the visitors who come and travel to this place. And also we take a look at the motivational diversification. So basically this helps us to understand if the reason to travel to a destination is diverse and is encompasses different aspects, and obviously the more offers and the more diversified the offer in the destination is, the destination will be more sustainable. And also we take a look at seasonality and dependence on markets of origin. So this way, basically, we try to understand if a destination is highly reliant on a specific time of a year or a specific origin markets. And this way, we try to cover different aspects of sustainability. So as you can see, the indexes that we are talking about come together in our platform in a pretty intuitive and user-friendly way, in a visualization that is easy to understand, and they are automatically updated. So the destination can observe and monitor the evolution of their sustainability journey, and they can compare it with different years, and also it's applicable to any destination in the world. So for benchmarking and for understanding how well the strategies and sustainability initiatives are performing, this can give them a broader vision, but also there is this possibility of integrate a specific data from destinations. So if a destination wants to gain a broader vision, they can integrate and monitor their own data next to these global indicators. And as you can see here, if we go through each of these indexes, we can have more details. So, for example, if we take a deeper look at distribution of tourism income, we can see that the average spend in the destination, we can compare it with the average spend in the destinations that we are monitoring, and its evolution. And also we can see the share of this spend in different categories in the economic sector of a destination. Or for example, under the concentration of a tourism offer index, you can see that how many hotel and non-hotel accommodation offers in the destination are in a square kilometer in a destination. And obviously the closer this number is to 100, it means that the offer is well distributed, and the less human pressure on land will be. But the index I would like to talk a little bit more about today is carbon footprint index, which is more related to that to our today's topic. So here basically what we are taking a look at is the carbon footprint that is generated, that is being generated in a destination by visitors in atmosphere in general while they're taking direct flight to a destination. So our methodology here was based on the methodology, and it has received the approval of the International Civil Aviation Organization, and we mix this data with the data that we have on the flight capacity from all the airports around the world, and we consider different factors in this calculation. We consider load factor, we consider the actual routes taken by the flights, the short haul, long haul, and medium haul flights. And this way we can understand the evolution of the carbon footprint in a destination. So here we can take a look at different aspects. For example, we can see the total carbon footprint which is generated to the atmosphere by visitors, and also its temporal evolution. So basically, first destination can understand if over time they are reducing their impact on the environment, and secondly, they can understand which month of the year is generating more pollution and contamination. We also take a look at the carbon footprint generated by each source market and per visitor. So basically by how many of CO2 emission is being generated by each visitor. And also we take into account the ratio between the carbon footprint and the revenue generated at the destination. So this is an interesting point because here what we try to show is to understand if there is any compensation level, let's say, between the CO2 emission and also the economic value that is generated in the destination. And this kind of insights can help to when it comes to, for example, marketing activities or strategic planning, not only considering one aspect or just economic aspect, but also to consider the markets that are bringing profitability to the destination, and at the same time they are not generating a lot of contamination toward the destination. So as you can see here, we have the individual spent per kilogram of CO2, and this way helps us to help the destination and us to understand which markets can be prioritized considering these two factors. And finally, what you can see here is how we apply this kind of metrics and indexes. So basically, this is a case study we've done for 4 European cities: Paris, Vienna, Berlin, and Seville. And here, what we have tried to understand is to understand if there is this level of compensation between the millions of tons of CO2 emissions that is being generated in the atmosphere, and comparing it with the distribution of tourist income, and to understand if there is any balance here, and also we can benchmark and we can understand how well the destination is acting regarding these two factors that I was mentioning earlier. So I hope I have covered all the essential aspects of this tool here. Basically, our aim is to provide destinations with tools that can help them in a practical and in an operational way, and to help them in their transformation journey. Of course, finally, it's a criteria, and always there is area to improve, and this can be discussed. But I think the main goal of all of us here and everyone that is working on this concept is to finally generate a more responsible and more sustainable and a better sector. So we hope that with this tool we can contribute to this objective. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Parisa. A round of virtual applause for Parisa. And great. So I'm interested, you get that data, that kind of saving people a lot of time potentially. How do you, and where do you scrape the data from to be able to do those kind of that carbon footprint analysis?
So actually the six main areas that I was mentioning are connectivity, social behavior, accommodation, spend data. So we work with different global data sources, and we basically the sustainability module is being built up on all these data that we gather. So for example, we work with Expedia, we work with Booking, Travelport, with Cirium, with MasterCard, and other global data sources, and this helps us to first understand the actual footprint of the destination and what's going on around, actually to understand the story of the destination based on data, and then help them to take a first step from there and develop their sustainability action based on these sources and these kind of analysis.
Cool. So big data plays an important part of this, I think, right, in the future. Exciting to see tools such as yours coming out and other things in the market like this. So really interesting to see how big data can simplify some of these really nasty challenges that some of us who try to do this manually have done, and kind of get excited when we see things like yours. Fantastic. Any questions for Parisa out there? Vikas from India has asked a question: how can local government use technology platforms for their destinations? I guess, you know, your clients are typically DMOs, right? I mean...
Yes, we work with public sector, we work with Ministry of Tourism, tourism boards, destination management organization, and basically anyone who is in charge of making strategic decisions and incorporating data into this process. So basically how we can help them, sometimes they have their own dashboard, they are observing, for example, the level of contamination in a specific destination, they have the consumption of water or electricity or other kind of data, and what we do, we provide a wider vision, let's say like a more holistic vision for them, to not only take a look at these specific metrics, but also take into account what's going on around their destination, and through API and through these tools, we can also integrate, or the platform can be integrated into their platform or dashboard. But also how, regarding the question, how they can benefit, for instance, I can share an example from Costa Rica. For example, seeing the level of contamination that is being generated by different airlines or different source markets is helping them to build up some negotiation with these airlines, so they can use their decision-making power to impact the environmental factor of sustainability, or when it comes to marketing activities, for example, they know where to concentrate their focus and attention, and not only consider, as I was mentioning, one aspect, but also consider other aspects that can help them to build a more sustainable destination.
Brilliant. Love it. Again, big data, providing different solutions. Definitely think that's part of the future. Great. Okay, then. We're going to do something different now. We're going to go and break out into groups, because there's a lot happening in this group. Some of you are doing some stuff. Some of you are not doing stuff. Some of you know each other. Some of you don't know each other. And as you know, part of the GDS tradition is to get you networking, talking to each other. So we're going to break up into groups. Milda's going to do that for us. And I'd like you to discuss two things. Where is your organization or your destination on your net zero journey? You know, what have you done, or what do you plan to do? And so hopefully you can learn from each other. Okay, there's some people in this group done a lot. There's people who've done nothing, and all of that's cool. So Milda, please ping everyone to a group. You're going to have about 12, 13 minutes in your group, and then we'll bring back, and then we'll carry on.
Great, thank you, Guy. You're all assigned to groups. You will be magically transported into your breakout rooms and will be transported back. In case you need to come back anytime during this breakout session, you can also just come back to the lobby, and I'll be there waiting in case you have any questions.
Remember to take yourself off mute and put your video on so you can talk to your friends. Good.
3, 2, 1, we go.
Hello, welcome back. Lovely to see lots of friendly faces. Haven't seen for a while.
Gracias. Sorry, how I can come back to my room? I just clicked something without wanted.
The rooms are finished, so you've been kicked out of your room. So the room has come and gone.
Oh no! Was having a really lovely conversation.
Yeah. Cool. I hope you had some nice conversations. We had to do a little bit of moving of people into rooms because some of the rooms were a bit too small. So we're learning to try and find the optimum size, not too big, not too small, and to deal with that. We realize everything's been going back to physical events, and we've kind of got a little bit out of habit of doing Zoom. So isn't that a change? So that's good. So Great. So, maybe I'm interested if any of you have got a kind of climate action plan. Maybe you can hold your hand up or put something in the chat. We know that we've got some people from Finland and Norway here have been working on stuff. Jaume's been working on stuff in Valencia, but who else? Interested to know if any of our French destinations, for example, have worked on it. I mean, the Danish ones. So I'd love to get some activity going on the chat to look at that. Because let's kind of move this forward a little bit. So you're looking at my screen now. There's a very interesting guide that's come out by WTTC. Worth having a look at it. I think it's one of the earlier guides, but it starts to make you think about what is a roadmap and what's required and what are some of these scenarios. And I know Jeremy and his work is going to be building up a lot on this into the future. But this is some of the stuff I think is really worth looking at. And I think what is really interesting is kind of asks a question of us all who work in destination is what is the role of the DMO? Is it to lead it? Is it to manage it? Is it to develop it? Is it to promote it? Is it to govern this kind of roadmap? I think many people have different answers. I kind of feel we need someone to lead it, and I think the DMO is the perfect organization to jump up and take the leadership, a bit like Jeremy was saying. But you're not going to get anywhere without it and without collaboration. So I just wanted to share kind of our vision and some of the work that we're just starting to do. So I know Xavier's on the line here. So we've formed a little collaboration with the University of Surrey, ourselves, and with Inedit, who is an engineering consultancy company in Barcelona. And we each have a different skill around this climate journey. So Xavier and his team have done a lot of work on research and analysis of EU tourism policies and individual destination strategies. Where obviously we bring a movement and we're working on lots of strategies with lots of you. And then Edit has done some really interesting kind of data work. And so I just wanted to kind of share you our approach. Very simple. So we think, the first step, and I call this just phase one of the decarbonisation journey, is to measure your footprint. Then you have to evaluate your results and understand them. And then you've got to develop a plan and get into action. We just heard one way from Parisa of starting to measure your carbon footprint. But you kind of, there's different ways to do it. You can use a tool like that, or you can kind of manually get the data. And when you start, you've got to decide what data you're gonna bring in and what you're gonna measure. In a perfect world, we measure everything. But if any of you have ever done any kind of measurement of your company or an event, I think some of you have done event carbon measurement, it's kind of, sometimes it's easier to get the big stuff. So Parisa could help you get the carbon footprint of flights. Maybe other ways you can get the flights data, and it's quite easy to calculate that. And that's probably, in a lot of places that could be 70% of the impact. But there's many other things, right, isn't there? So how do you get the data, and do you include the data for trains coming to your destination, for cars, ships, buses, etc.? And then in the destination, what do you measure? You might want to measure the accommodation, important, right? You might want to measure the internal transportation. How do people get around the city when they're in your place? Again, important. And then you start to look at, well, what's the, if you're LA, what's the carbon footprint of Disney World, Disneyland, or Euro Disney if you're in Paris? So you might want to start to look at different attractions. But maybe when you start, you can't measure all of them. So you maybe pick a handful of attractions. And then you're like, how do we measure events? Because events are pretty big. They should be involved in this. So it's not easy, because you're going to start to get duplication and handover. But you've got to start to build up a strategy. And that strategy is going to get you looking at, carbon coming from energy usage. Fuel in cars and planes may come from water usage, waste usage, procurement, production of materials. So there's a long journey there to be started. Inedit, who we're working with, did the carbon footprint of Barcelona. And here you can see, I'm not sure how many of you speak Catalan. I know Javier does. So if you look at this chart here, we can see that the main footprint of tourism in Barcelona comes from people coming and going into Barcelona. Not surprised, from transportation. Hotels are only 3.1%. Activities that were included and events and things like that, 0.3%. Internal transport, 0.7%. So this was the first time this was done. But then you want to go deeper. You want to start to look at where, where is that footprint coming from? Is it coming from tourists here, which is the biggest one here? Is it coming from day travelers? Is it coming from cruise ships? So that's where you want to start diving down and start mapping this. Does everyone have the same carbon footprint? You saw in Parisa's presentation, she starts to map carbon footprint with value or money spent. A lot of the work that Xavier and his team and the University of Surrey doing is that mapping now. And then we can start to make decisions. Do we want to attract people that have a high carbon footprint, or do we want to start to look at someone who has a low carbon footprint and a high spend? So we can start to play with variables about what could the perfect visitor look like. And it's really early stuff, but some people are playing with this. I know in Norway they're working on this. And so really interesting stuff that's happening here. I invite you to have a look at the work that Jaume's done in Valencia. This was his first calculation. You did this, I think, 2019, Jaume, and I know you've done some more work since there, and you've done a water footprint as well. And so perhaps you can put the links in the chat of where people should look for more information, because I think your work has been super pioneering. But once you've got the data, right, that's only the first step. Okay, you got the data. Second step, you start to understand it. And third, you have to start creating a plan. We're going to hear a little bit more about science-based targets in the next two presentations. But SBTs is something you all need to start to learn about and familiar yourself about. This is the tool that's going to help you start to build up a scientific path to decarbonisation. And as I said, the other guys are going to talk about this. But once you've kind of done that, you're going to need to work with some consultants or a university and some kind of people to model the data and start to look at how do we go from where you are today, because that's what the data will start to give you, where you are today, to zero in the future. And to work out how to get to zero, you need a path map, a roadmap. So you need to work out how do we, in theory, reduce by kind of 40-50% by 2030 and then zero by 2050. So you need to start to look at something. This data is from the Zero Carbon Forum in the UK, who did this plan for hospitality. You'll see the link in that. I suggest you have a look at this report. I think it's one of the best things I've ever seen so far. And they really started to look at and break it down. This is what we have to do for buildings, what we have to do for energy, what we have to do for sourcing. This can give you a lot of ideas. As Jeremy said, this is complex stuff. Right? This is not easy. You're going to need help to do this, and you need to collaborate and share. So we really invite you to get going and look at this. But as well as the big stuff, you can do some of the easier stuff is start to get and run workshops with your stakeholders and for people to start and facilitate this process to get people to start to looking what they can do. And once you've identified those building blocks, like you can see in the plan here, you can start to get people to brainstorm what they can do. An important thing, I think a lot of what we're talking about is mitigation. As again, Jeremy touched on, we shouldn't forget adaptation. Things are going to get very, very bumpy. Climate change is going to affect us increasingly more. And so we need to learn how to adapt our destinations to the changes. And whether that's someone like South Africa who've got used to implementing really severe water conservation processes, or whether you're in California really getting used to how do you deal with wildfires. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to start to look at, and whether that's from crisis and emergency planning to planning for sea rise. These are things that you've got to start to put into your long-term tourism plans. Sad to say that, but it's not only about mitigation. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We're now going to get back into the kind of practical aspects, and I thought we'd invite Isla to come along to talk about Trace and the work they're doing to help you measure or help organisations measure the footprint of events. So it's my pleasure to invite Poppy, who's the learning lead and someone we're working a lot with on various projects at the moment. So Poppy, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see my logo now. So we've got a few slides here about Isla, who we are and what we do. And I'm going to talk to you about our tool that we've launched called Trace. So yeah, we're going to look at Trace, but I'm going to focus on the event industry. So it's almost like a microcosm. A lot of the sort of destination stuff, you're looking at it of a macro, going back down and down into your supply chain. You've got venues, travel and transport operators, and also events. And so we're sort of focused in on that events area. And we'll look at Trace and then end on the sort of roles and how it could possibly integrate. But Isla. What is Isla? So our mission is to transform the event industry in line with our global net zero future. We are focused on environmental changes, so we are less focused on sort of social aspects or biodiversity. It is more focused on climate change and that current crisis. We provide a lot of training, and this is to our members, which are a lot of event agencies, event organisers, exhibition organisers, but also other layers of the supply chain. So we have print suppliers, AV and tech production suppliers, set builders, caterers even. So it's that kind of world of events. The training, we have gone in at basic level because actually we have found that there is a lack of understanding of the science. We've built a network and resources that are free to help support staff and businesses and really sort of collaborate. And I'm just going to quickly show you one of those, which is this Proceed website, and I'll put all the addresses in the chat shortly. It's a best practice framework with loads of guidance, and you can jump down to the bottom, whether you're a venue, event organizer, and it highlights what sections might be relevant. If you go to the section, my internet's not the fastest, so it may take a moment. There is lots of information, practical guidance about what you can do. You can download templates, policies and plans with basic, better, best for how to sort of plan your events or things that are in your venues in order to reduce your impact straight away. And we have sort of benchmarking and checklists of things that you can do. So lots of resources there in a very huge website. And then we developed Trace, which is a carbon measurement platform for events, because one didn't really exist that did what the event industry fully needed. So as part of our mission to support the event industry, we wanted to help develop those tools. Thank you for popping out the chat. So the event industry, I've sort of done a really rough, awful map here, not to scale. But what we're looking at really is that sort of red bubble there are what we're calling events, and where that intersects with other areas of sort of travel and tourism, venues, hospitality sections, festivals, those kind of events, cultural events, lots of things like meetings, conferences, trade shows, AGMs, so indoors and outdoors. And that's kind of where we are and what we sort of support and who we work with. So first of all, can an event be net zero? So we align with the Paris Agreement, and we sort of recommend that at a bare minimum, we aim to cut our emissions by 50% by 2030, and by 2050 be operating at net zero in order to limit global warming to that 1.5 degrees. We do a lot of teaching on what net zero means and the sort of end goal of that balance. I won't go into too much because I feel like a lot of you on the call are all over this. But generally, net zero is accepted to mean sort of that reducing of emissions by about 90% before accounting for any offsetting or carbon removal. So what we're sort of saying to the event industry is that most of them will need to reduce their emissions by 90%. And that's some long-term, so those science-based targets initiative, but there may be some residual emissions that may remain that will need to be offset. And that's the kind of message, the sort of basic teaching that we're trying to teach every company that sort of comes through us, is like, okay, there are some big reductions that we need to make, and we need to be measuring those. So back to that question, can you have a net zero event? No, not really, not right now anyway. So this is basically the key premise is that net zero is a 90% reduction of emissions over time. So it's not possible to have a net zero event right now unless you really could do the same event and then measure it again the next year and you've actually slashed it. Maybe you've gone all digital. So you need to run it the same again to demonstrate that you've actually cut those emissions in a real way. So a big part of what we're doing at ISLA is educating people to avoid that greenwash and accidentally using the sort of wrong terminology, and getting everybody on that journey. What about carbon neutral events? You may see a lot of those. So yes, at the moment there can be carbon neutral events. This is actually taken from the Australian government's initiative by Climate Active. Yep. You have to avoid and reduce your emissions and then offset those remaining ones to get that balance of zero. So those claims of carbon neutral events, which many of our members, our agencies, our event organisers are being asked by their clients, which are big brands, big organisations, umbrella groups, they're being asked to deliver a carbon neutral event, which is fantastic. This has come from consumer awareness and a desire to do the right thing by brands, by companies on every level. So we may start to see more and more carbon neutral events. Lots of our members and organisations have signed the Net Zero Carbon Events Pledge, and that's been signed by large festivals and cultural organisations that may only do one event a year, but also these agencies that deliver hundreds a year in all parts of the world. You know, these are global agencies that may be based, a lot of them in the UK, but not all, and deliver events all around the world in many of your destinations, both indoors and outdoors. So they're asked to be committed to operate as a net zero company. So that means both their business operations, where their HQ and facilities are based. So just like a hotel or like the Excel Centre is going to be net zero in itself. So their business operations, but also their event deliveries that they deliver on behalf of other clients, because it's a whole supply chain. So by 2050 at the latest, some are committing to 2030, which is amazing. But by 2050 at the latest is the pledge. So we educate them on their key steps to first reduce their emissions as much as possible. So that's where we've got that Proceed website. It's about making those immediate cuts and those swap outs of practices and materials and things that they can do. And then measure their emissions, offset those remaining emissions through an accredited offsetting scheme, and report on their performance. So a lot of our members at the moment, a lot of the event industry we're finding have made the pledge, but haven't yet put the meat on the bones, I hate that term, but with their full roadmap. So they're at this stage now of sort of making those reductions that they can straight away and starting to measure in order to set their baseline year, so they know what they've got to reduce from, so that you can then say, well, I've got to net zero, I've reduced 90% from my initial. So we're at that kind of stage within the event industry, which is why we developed Trace as a tool, because when we talked about science-based targets initiatives and the scopes earlier, we just touched on it very briefly, scope 1, 2 and 3. In the event industry, a lot of what we do is scope 3. Because we are operating within somebody else's venue. We've hired a room, or we've hired other companies to sort of deliver sections. There's a brand, then there's the event agency, then there might be a production agency, then they've got a set builder, and then they've got a caterer, and this whole supply chain feeds in. So actually it becomes a lot of scope 3. And there weren't many tools out there that easily and quickly measured scope 3, because when you're working on hundreds of events a year, gathering that information and data can be quite laborious. So we've developed this tool. We feel strongly that you can't manage what you don't measure. We feel that we've moved on from that time where we were all talking about reducing our footprint to saying, well, let's put some numbers here. You need to know what your footprint is to know if you're reducing it and what you're doing is enough. So Trace is a platform that measures emissions from events and creates carbon footprint dashboards with reduction tips. It's very much focused on that those calculations, that CO2 equivalent carbon footprint information for Trace. Proceed is a bit wider and has more wider environmental benefits. Trace is giving you those numbers and that data that you might need. It's designed to make it as simple as possible because event teams are so busy. We have had to strike the balance between accuracy and usability, because if it was too laborious, nobody would do it, but we do want to gather real data. So we tried to capitalise on data that event organisers are already collecting. They have flight schedules, they have the information that they've booked, they have loading bay schedules, they know what they're booking and paying for. And then we've created templates and spreadsheets for the rest of the supply chain in order to sort of send it out. And we're actually about to launch a new feature on the tool where we're going to do away with emailing spreadsheets, and all of your supply chain will be able to log in and input their own data. We're continually reviewing the platform to make it as quick and as easy as possible for every element of the supply chain to put in real data, whilst it also has lots of estimation tools that you can use in the meantime. And this all sort of accumulates to give you in-app reduction tips and a live dashboard to provide the guidance straight away so you can start lowering your impact. So without further ado, I'm going to show it to you. I'm sorry if I'm going a little fast. I know we've got a lot to cover. This is the Trace tool. So on the home page, there's lots of information to do, but I'm just going to jump straight in. And it's all about measuring your events. So these are standalone kind of events or parts of a roadshow, however you want to break it down. So this is some that we've made earlier. We've set these up already. If I have a look at a test hybrid event, we've already entered all of the event details on this one, where it is, what type of event, the sector that it's in, budget. And the reason we're gathering some of this information is less about the event itself and the footprint itself. It's about an industry report that ISLA is going to be generating. And we're quite upfront with our members that this is something that we are doing. So we are gathering this data on a global scale in order to produce some benchmarks for events that don't exist yet. There have been some previous studies. There's a great one from France. Meet Green have done a really good study, and they have looked at a number of events. But we need more. We need more information, more averaging, more kind of knowledge and being empowered with this data of what events actually generate. And so we're sort of gathering this information as well. So everybody that uses the tool is collaborating to that sort of global research piece as well. So the data that you need to, or that we ask people to collect, ISLA has kind of set the boundaries of what information we feel every event should be collecting. And we've been quite ambitious. We have energy use, which is standard, but we also have production and graphics. So we ask for material use. So I'll show you one of these modules. So all those big sets, the big stage, the backdrops, the materials. This one's very heavy on aluminium. Let's change some of these. Let's say Bob he was carpeting it. We've got some glass, some toughened glass there. I want to put some wood in there, some timber. We collect information on the source of it, whether it was recycled, hired, and what happened to it afterwards. So you can sort of gather this life cycle assessment. And each of the modules works in a similar way. So we've got graphics. And obviously here you can get the template, and soon there'll be a button there to email a supplier and they'll fill this in and you can okay it or nay it. We have food and drink, event transport, which is the sort of shipping and logistics of all the items that you've built, and also your audience travel and accommodation, as well as staff travel and accommodation. So this is where it may overlap with some of the other dashboards and the one we just looked by Parisa then. This is around travel. So if we're looking at the everything except flights on this module here, we have all sorts of different ways that our audience can travel. Numbers of trips, you can put in postcodes, which works sort of globally, not just in the UK. And this app is also available in other languages. And we have sort of, yeah, you can put in locations, put in postcodes, and it'll estimate it. Or you can just put in the total mileage if you prefer to work that way. So we've tried to make it really flexible. It works like a spreadsheet. You can copy and paste from existing spreadsheets. And also, if you've only got sample data, if you've done a survey and you've only got 10% of your total audience, you can actually pop in there 10% and we'll extrapolate it up. Or if you have no information at all, we have these estimation tools, which we are continually looking to improve. So this is the interface of this is going to get better. But again, from your marketing team, a lot of events will know rough splits of where people are coming from, and we can use that at very sort of guidance estimation tool level. Oh, close. And then we do have flights as well. And you can sort of tick things on and off depending on whether they're relevant to your event, and accommodation. So we also gather that information about hotel stays. The only sort of information that they'll need there, number of room and nights, country, and also whether their hotel is on a renewable tariff, because we found that makes the biggest difference in their emissions. And a lot of hotels are quite readily putting that information on their websites, because if you're doing something good, you want to shout about it. So we're hopeful, and what we're finding so far is a lot of event organisers and the bookers are able to provide that. It's a bit trickier with audiences. We do have to estimate that when it comes to the audience. But for staff, it's the exact same interface. You've got a lot more concrete information. And we also have online event tools. So if it's a hybrid event, you'll have both, or if it's purely online, you might have some production elements and just online. So once you've gathered all the data, you can then see your results, and we have some dashboards. You can have a look at your dashboard for the event, and it will give you carbon footprint information per attendee, your waste footprint, and sort of breaks that down a little bit further. Your different scopes for in line with the greenhouse gas protocol, different sections, and then we get these reduction tips. They're quite broad, so it's designed to work with the Proceed website so that you can actually delve further to actually reduce them. But we try and set some targets. These are almost like KPIs for what we think events should be realistically trying to achieve. And for each of these sections, you can look at it on a summary page and get an overall kind of idea of where you can make these biggest reductions. Because at a glance here, we can have a look and see that this huge reduction that might be possible by replacing 25% of our materials with reclaimed or hired. And that might be actually quite achievable versus, you know, consolidating your road transport and trucking by a third is actually quite a difficult process logistically, and you'd only save 0.59% overall. So it allows event organisers that are time and resource poor to focus their energy to make those bigger hitting reductions quickly.
Poppy, sorry to jump in. Kind of need to move you on, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I'll just show the last page then is the company's summary, which shows the total sort of all the events, but you can also filter this by things like country. So if you're working globally and you want to see the combined footprint of all your events in one particular country, or you can even combine them and actually contrast and compare France versus Switzerland, things like that, on your combined dashboard. So that fits into, I'm actually going to skip a few slides here, but it fits into your net zero roadmap, because you've then got your data in actually to put the information on the meat on your bones, as I said before. So in terms of using the data, it's all about getting that information from the venues, suppliers, staff and in-house teams. And in terms of operational processes, what you then do with that information, which is probably relevant on a more macro level in terms of the destination, how you use that carbon footprint information, those setting of targets, the reporting, who to and what for, and how you map that on your net zero journey. So in terms of the roles of DMOs and how you can support the measurement and the sort of wider supply chain, we like to talk about control and influence. So I guess I'd put it to you to sort of really think about where you have the agency to decide on what you will and won't do. Can you choose who you want to work with? And can you set strategy, targets, incentives, capturing the full impact of businesses and events at your destination who might not be registered as a business in your city or area? They might actually be based elsewhere, but then host events within your venues. And then in terms of that influence, where you can assert influence of the venues or events in your destination, can you request carbon impact reports from further down the supply chain? If we're all starting to measure, can you ask for that information and prioritize or highlight low impact businesses or events? Or facilitate data collection in any way? And I don't know the answers to those questions, but I thought I would put it to you to show you what the event industry are doing on that sort of more micro level. And that's everything.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Poppy. That's amazing as always. Isla and the GDS have been working very closely together over the last 6 months. We've been piloting the tool at various clients. We've rolled this out, started a rollout of this across SAP. We've done various associations, and we're learning a lot together, and really enjoyed the partnership. And we started the work after SAP hired us to evaluate different tools in the market, and we evaluated 32 tools on the market, and this Trace came out by far as the best tool that we've ever seen. And so we cancelled our development project, stopped doing our own development, and bought a license. And so we're now looking to take this to the next step, and we're just finalizing the details about becoming a kind of a destination partner for Isla. And so we're now talking to various destinations about really working out the questions to what Poppy just threw out. How do we do this? What's the role of the DMO? How can a DMO really pioneer this and help to collect the data? Because as you've seen from Poppy and the other presenters today, this is not easy. It's going to require a lot of us working it together. Okay, we need to move on. There's lots of questions, but let's see if we can answer those in the chat box. But it's time to move on to the next level. So, right, you've done all the perfect stuff. You've measured it. You've reduced, and now you've got some carbon left over. You can't reduce any further. So you're going to need to do some offsetting. How do we do that? So I thought to invite a friend of mine, Kirsty, who runs the Climate Impact Partners. I've known for a very long time. She's been a real pioneer. I think we met initially in COP15 in Copenhagen. That was a few years ago. So Kirsty, over to you.
Hi, Guy. Thanks, everyone. Just to clarify, I run the partnerships team in Climate Impact Partners. I don't run the whole Climate Impact Partners. My CEO might have something to say about that. And also, just housekeeping, Guy, because we're a bit behind time. What's my timings?
Can you do it in 15 minutes?
Yeah, let's give it a go. I'll put my timer there. Let me just share my screen with you. Thank you ever so much for inviting me to join and speak with you, and you've curated it so nicely. We've heard from 3 or 4 speakers today, exactly as you just summarized, talking about what you need to do in order to measure and then manage your carbon footprint. And this is hopefully the next piece in the puzzle that you can be thinking about. So as Guy said in the introduction, this is really an opportunity for me to share with you a bit more about what we do in terms of carbon offsetting, developing our projects, and hopefully it will just demystify some of that jargon. There might be a couple of acronyms on the screen, so do write in the chat box if you need clarification on those. So 4 substantive areas of the presentation with the Q&A, I think at the end if we have time. So I'll introduce Climate Impact Partners. Then I'll talk a little bit about the market context. So what is the voluntary carbon market looking like at the moment? in terms of carbon offsetting, what are some of the basic principles of it, and then what kind of projects there are that can be accredited to generate your carbon offset. So Climate Impact Partners has a clear purpose. We believe that carbon markets have a critical role to play in delivering action by putting a price on carbon and funding carbon reduction and removal, actually, projects to meet our global goals. We as a company have an ambitious target to reduce 1 billion tonnes of CO2 by 2030, by the end of this decade. And how are we doing this? We develop and deliver high quality carbon offset projects and solutions around the world, which I'll go into in a bit more detail. And that is going to help us stay on a trajectory of keeping warming below 1.5 degrees. Here you see a global map with the icons showing where we have projects around the world. I'll go into the details of what the different coloured icons are in a little bit, but you can see that you've got the pink or the purple dots there that relate to health and livelihoods, blue that relate to sustainable infrastructure, and the green that relate to nature-based solutions. So we really do have a global presence in those projects that we're developing. And just to say, actually, just to jump on that, giving the theme of today's summit, today's conference, thinking about your own offsetting strategies, we can help support you with finding those projects that are nearer to you, more local to you, and so that they can be a bit more geographically relevant to you and those stakeholders of yours. Bit of history, not just about Climate Impact Partners, but about the carbon market. And this is the voluntary piece, really, the voluntary carbon market. So going back to 1997, the late 90s, Climate Impact Partners is a merger of two companies, Climate Care and Natural Capital Partners. We merged last year. So this timeline shows what both of those companies were doing since 1997. Both of them were established in 1997, and how they have been critically involved in the development of the voluntary carbon market. I think these slides are going to be shared, so I won't go through each of the milestones. You can have a look at those in your own time. But suffice to say, we have 20 plus years of experience working in the carbon offset world, and indeed, as I said, helping to design and develop some of those cornerstone and fundamental principles, in our view, that is about getting the highest quality and highest integrity projects and sort of capabilities in the market. So thinking about that market context, this is a slide that has come from one of our reports. We do an annual report that looks at the global, the Fortune Global 500 companies around the world, and looks at the commitments that they have made in terms of reducing their carbon footprints, or just dealing with their carbon. And what you can see from this graph is, and it's come up a couple of times, is up until 2015, you had a fairly steady, slight increase of commitments around being carbon neutral. But 2015, that was the Paris Agreement, so the UN climate change COP21. The Paris Agreement, after that moment, you have a whole series of other commitments that is really driving activity in the voluntary carbon market. And our report has shown that 38% of those Fortune 500 companies have set a major climate milestone for 2030, or have indeed achieved one already. This next version, the next iteration of this report, is coming out in a couple of weeks, the 21st of September, I think. So keep an eye out for that, because we expect to see, again, an increase in the number of companies that are making the kind of commitments that you're looking at making. And so what does that mean, and why is that important for this conversation? It shows that there is a significant amount of demand for these kinds of projects that are going to help companies and other entities, cities, other organizations, civil society organizations, and other institutions to really meet those climate commitments that they're making. I'm anticipating this might come up in the Q&A, so I'm referring to a report that came out recently by EY earlier this year around the outlook for carbon credits and offsets. This is a pricing graph. There are a lot of projections, forecasts, and trajectories being put out there in the market at the moment. You might hear all sorts of things about what is the cost of a carbon offset, how much does the carbon credit cost? We can talk about that a bit more in the Q&A, but I think this is a really helpful graph that shows you the direction of travel of where EY and others, and indeed we're seeing a lot of data to support this, where we are anticipating the market will go in terms of costs of those carbon credits. think about carbon offsetting, and I am about halfway through, so hopefully we'll stick to 15 minutes. Very basically, I'm putting up here a term, and sorry if all of you know this, but I think it's really helpful to just get back to basics. The International Carbon Reduction and Offset Alliance, the ICROA or ICROA, I think that's the first acronym, but hopefully that's quite well explained. Incidentally, actually, Climate Care and Natural Capital Partners were both involved in the formation of ICROA back at the beginning of the voluntary market. This is it's a voluntary market, so it's not a regulatory body, but this is really the sort of standard bearer, one of the key institutions in the market that helps set the standard of what good quality, high quality projects are. So it states that carbon offsetting is a mechanism used to compensate for corporate or individual carbon footprints through the purchase of carbon credits used by those standards that have accredited projects that either remove GHG from the atmosphere or avoid generating them in the first place. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the distinction between avoidance and removal, because that's a bit of jargon that you might have heard when you're looking into or doing your research in the carbon market. We heard just now from Poppy quite a bit about the Science-Based Target Initiative, so I won't dwell too long on this. And again, quite a helpful graph. If you're sort of visual like I am, seeing data represented in a graph can be quite helpful. And I've put a hyperlink in the slides when they're shared around. You can actually click through and get to the net zero standard. But as you can see there are 4 steps. I mean, Poppy really did go into quite a bit of detail, so I'll just whistle through them. Step 1, you see the icon there. Step 1 is about setting your near-term science-based target. And they say that's your 5 to 10 year target of what you want to be reducing your emissions by, in line with a 1.5 degree scenario. Step 2 is setting a longer term science-based target, and so that is to reduce your emissions to a residual level no later than 2050, and that's to be in line with 1.5 degrees as well. So the SBT states that you should be doing that to get to a place of just having residual emissions no later than 2050. Step 3 is the additional work that you can be doing that goes beyond your value chain mitigation. What we already spoke about, how in the events industry, you're looking at a lot of your emissions come from your scope 3 emissions, and this is looking at going even beyond your value chain. What further and additional work can you be doing to sort of support the global effort to keep us on a trajectory to 1.5 degrees? And then finally, the neutralizing of those residual emissions. And that's really where those removals offsets come in. And so I'll be talking a little bit more about the distinction, again, between avoidance and removals in a moment. And so I think that graph quite helpfully shows you the trajectory that you should be thinking about. Some are more ambitious, some are setting net zero targets for ahead of 2050, which is fantastic. But to be in line with the science, the latest IPCC reports, and what the Paris Agreement sort of set as that key milestone, we should be doing it no later than 2050. So here we are then, the difference between avoidance and removals, different type of credits. A removal credit, and again, the source of this is ICROA, so that coalition that I spoke about before. Removal credits stem from activities that absorb or pull carbon out of the atmosphere, such as many nature-based solutions. Think of anything that photosynthesizes, reforestation, peatland restoration, mangrove restoration, and so on, as well as this new emerging removal approach, which is engineered methods such as direct air capture or accelerated, or you might have heard of it as enhanced mineral weathering. So that's a removal credit, anything that is taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. An avoidance credit, these come from projects that reduce emissions by preventing their release into the atmosphere in the first place. So these projects reduce emissions compared with the most likely scenario. So your baseline scenario, for example, RED Plus forestry projects, new renewable energy projects. Obviously, you're not relying on fossil fuels, you're switching to renewable energy, very topical in Europe at the moment. And so you're avoiding those emissions going into the atmosphere in the first place. In more simple terms, I like to think of it as a bathtub, and this is an analogy that is often used. If you're running a tap in a bath, you're obviously filling it up with water. You need to in order to stop the bath from overflowing, you need to both switch the tap off. So that is an avoidance credit. You're stopping the water going into the bathtub or the GHG going into the atmosphere. And then you need to also take the plug out of the bath so that you can be letting that water run down the sink. So sometimes these removal type credits, particularly in the nature-based solution context, are referred to as carbon sinks. So I find that quite a helpful analogy to remember the difference between the two. So assessing quality, what you really need to be looking for in terms of your offset, the ACROA Code of Best Practice, and this is what all of those high quality projects that we work with, we develop, or we source for you needs to be in line with. And the key points there, those 4 key points, they must be real. Those projects must be real and measurable. We've heard a lot about measurement today, but being able to measure the impact, the positive impact that those projects are having is fundamentally one of the most important things. They need to be permanent. So the project needs to be itself sustainable and have longevity. It needs to be additional. You need to demonstrate that the carbon finance that will be generated from the credit, from the purchase of the credit, is additional to any other money. Or put another way, if that carbon finance wasn't there, the project wouldn't be able to get funding. So that additionality point, you really need to be able to prove that it's the carbon finance that is making the biggest difference. And then, of course, they need to be verified, independently verified. So someone needs to go and check every few years that the project is still there, it is still delivering the outcomes that it said it would, and continues to show those other points. So the main standards that you will have heard about, I've put the three ones up there: VERA, Gold Standard, and the UNFCCC CDM standard, the 3 main global standards that accredit projects in line with those principles that I just showed on the previous slide. There are more and emerging standards happening at the national level. For example, in the UK, there is a Woodland Carbon Code and a Peatland Code. So that's a standard specific to the UK, and elsewhere across the world. So in some of your regions, you might be more familiar with some of those newer standards that are emerging. But for the majority of the history of the voluntary carbon market, these have been the standard bearers, the main standards that you need to be thinking about if you're looking at those projects that you want to be purchasing offsets from. So in my final minutes, just talk about the different types of verified projects that are available in the market. So I did mention before when I showed up our global map that there are largely 3 projects that we work with, we develop: nature-based solutions, health and livelihoods, and sustainable infrastructure. So those nature-based solution projects protect and restore forests, grasslands, mangroves, and other similar ecosystems that can provide 1/3 of the solution to address climate change in a cost-effective way. There's a helpful resource there if you want to read further about it. Health and livelihoods, and this is what is really at the heart of the work that we do in the projects we develop. We actually think beyond carbon. We're thinking about those other sustainable development goals that we can be helping to achieve. So social impact-based solutions that provide clean water, clean cooking, small-scale renewable energy such as solar or biogas that help support rural households, and not only helping to avoid carbon being put into the atmosphere, but they're also helping to improve livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and managing to meet other sustainable development goals as well. Sustainable infrastructure, you'll probably be quite familiar with seeing wind farms, solar farms, or other large-scale grid renewable energy projects. These are some of the oldest projects that we have sort of in the market, because if you think sort of 15, 20 years ago, solar and wind and other renewable projects really needed to rely on carbon finance to get them up and running. And as you've seen over the years, it's been very successful, and we've seen such an increase in renewable projects globally, and the price of those renewables go down. And that's what the role of the voluntary carbon market is, to help kickstart these types of projects, make them more affordable, and help scale and sort of replicate them globally. Emerging technologies that you might have heard of just in the last minute then are quite new in the market. You might have heard of technological greenhouse gas removals, GGRs, or other sort of engineered removals. And these relate to direct air capture, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. And these are where you're directly sucking carbon out of the atmosphere through a process of mineralization, or more passive, or other passive or technological methods that are sort of sinking carbon into powdered limestone or something like that that can form a permanent new substance that the carbon is locked into. So just thinking about you, carbon neutral and net zero destinations, I thought 3 things for you to think about could be your impact, your engagement, and innovation in these areas. So impact, supporting projects that avoid, reduce, and remove greenhouse gases can have a significant positive impact and make a difference not only to your own footprints, but our global emissions trajectory. Engagement, thinking about the work that you do, it's all about the people who come to visit your cities, and it's all about their experience in the city. So your leadership can provide opportunities to really engage with local communities and those who choose your destinations to have a wide-ranging influence and increase actions elsewhere. Because if people who visit your destination see some of the fantastic work that you're supporting, they might be inspired to go and do similar things when they return home. And then innovation, there are opportunities to support emerging and other new types of projects. For example, if you're a coastal region, you can support blue carbon projects that mean your carbon neutral or net zero strategy can be cutting edge and most relevant to your destination. So I thought I'd leave you on those 3 things. And if we have time, Guy, we can have some Q&A, or I haven't seen the chat. If there's any questions in the chat, I can move to that.
Guy, you're on mute.
No. Thank you very much, Kirsty. That was amazing. Big virtual round of applause. As usual, bang on, perfect, beautifully explained. Yeah, really, really interesting. I've only got 2 minutes, and I kind of think, kind of looking at the journey today, how we've gone from measurement to offsetting. What I'm really excited about is as we start to work with our partners on this call more and more together to look for new solutions. With Kirsty, with GDS and her organization have a strategic partnership. We're working at the moment on some big client projects where we're offsetting and building portfolios for clients. So some projects are infrastructure projects, some are nature projects, some are more social projects, and each of those has different price points. And so by having a portfolio, you can play with the pricing to make it fit better the budgets. We're also kind of researching how we do more destination-wide initiatives and looking at with some destinations that really, could we build a big portfolio of local and international projects. So lots happening in this space. I wish we had another hour, but we promised to finish by 12 o'clock. So unfortunately, we better go. So let's kind of wrap this up. We talked a little bit today about mitigation, measurement, road mapping, decarbonisation. Talked and touched on a little bit about adaptation. And then I think there's a third part of this is really about regeneration. And so a lot of, some of the stuff that Kirsty was talking about and the rest of the team, this kind of completes this circle. So for you, if you're on your journey and you're starting it, we'd love to hear more. Love for you to share stuff and share it between the community. We're here to help more and work this out together because it's going to be a journey. And I think a couple of people touched on this, but I think this social aspect often gets forgotten. And in the last IPCC report, this was the quote: "The best way to give effective and lasting protection from climate chaos is through action that addresses inequities such as those based on gender, ethnicity, disability, age, location, and income." So this is more than green. And let's remember that as we start to work out our plans and our strategies. We're going to be talking about this a lot more in our new white paper that will come out soon in October. We're just finalizing and racing that. And so thank you to many of you who've given us the case studies into that project. And finally, a big thank you. Thank you to all your speakers, to our participants. Our next webinar is on November the 16th when we launch the index and the learnings from that one. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. And we'll see you soon.